What means relative neighborhood? In a relative neighborhood graph, two nodes A and B are connected if there is no patient or node C which is closer to both A and B. The main point I want to say at this moment is that these graphs nicely represent patient clusterings, and they can work with any distance function, be it Euclidean, Mahalanobis, intermesh, or handcrafted distance over genetic data. Also, what is interesting is that you can color your patient label and it can represent a certain feature like quality of life after treatment, or you can also visualize a certain image like mesh thumbnail inside a node. This is the main screen of the neighborhood graphs module, and with one example of the neighborhood graph, the semantics of this graph is very simple. Every node in this graph corresponds to one patient, and the line, for example, here means that these two patients are very close to each other. For example, this line here means that there is no third patient which is closer to both of these two patients. And the color on this graph, on this particular graph, represents age. The GUI is pretty simple. You have a toolbar, you have a graph panel, and you have a status bar with basic statistics about your graph. What is also interesting is that besides clinical data and patient similarities, graphs are nicely suitable for displaying images corresponding to patients. In this particular case, you can see pulmonary trunk corresponding to patients visualized inside the nodes. And in this case, you can still apply similar operations as are used for usual graphs, such as coloring, clustering, and so on. Perhaps the main competitor to neighborhood graphs is heat maps, because heat maps are very well known to clinicians, especially for geneticists. But if you compare neighborhood graphs to heat maps, we believe, of course, that the neighborhood graphs are better. Represented using an intuitive entity relationship representation and much easier to read. Also, additional features can be visualized at nodes. The layout is flexible and allows easily to visualize clusters and large nodes and so on. The only benefit of heat maps which we could spot is that they allow to simultaneously visualize more than 10,000 similarities. But actually most of those similarities are redundant, so you do not need to see so many similarities, and visualizing the data as a neighborhood graph is much more straightforward.